We're thrilled to have Antoinette Weibel, Professor Antoinette Weibel, who is one of Switzerland's most prominent trust researchers and thought leaders in this important area, as well as Laura Curtis, who runs Vanguard's European marketing activities across the continent. To talk to us today about what trust means in financial services in particular, why it's more relevant today than perhaps it was in the past, and what financial services companies can do to bolster the trust in their companies and in their brands. So I'd love to start with you, Antoinette. I wonder if you could take the first question and just kind of sort of encapsulate what trust really is on the one hand, and then also you speak a lot about trust rocks. Why does trust rock for you?
Okay, let me start with the difficult question, the pudding question. What is trust all about? So in research, we say it's the willingness to be vulnerable. And that basically means we are able to depend on somebody without a double safety net. And of course, we are only going to do that if we expect the other person to really not exploit our vulnerability. So it's a complicated, fuzzy concept with a lot of risk involved, but with a huge payout. So. And that's also why I believe it rocks. I believe it's the best investment you can have for three basic reasons. The first reason is it saves costs hugely. The second reason is it helps to combat a crisis, which is important right now. And the third reason, which I believe makes trust better than gold, is that if you use trust, it's getting bigger, it's enriched, which I don't think it's the same thing with gold. So these are the three most important reasons. And maybe I just go into the crisis one, but because I believe that is at present the most important quality of trust. So why would I say it helps us to combat a crisis? That's actually based on a lot of trust and stress research, where we can show it's very important for employees to have two types of trust in a situation of crisis. The first is you need the bottom-up trust. So people want to have leaders or the company who really knows what they're doing to some extent, with some reliability. But more importantly, they also want to have somebody where they feel they're being cared of. There's warmth towards them, because only then they can enter out of the fear zone, which is very important for them to act in these situations. And the second important thing is they also need top-down trust. So you need to empower your employees now. You need to grant them trust, because otherwise they're not able to give you all their ingenuity to find ways of saving costs, to generate new ways of business. So really these two types of trust are essential, I would say, even now in the midst of the crisis we're in.
Very interesting. So thank you very much. Very nice definition, and also reason why you love the topic. I especially appreciated this relationship between trust and efficiency. And I also kind of imagine how a client reacts with an advisor. And if the client kind of has a rocky relationship with an advisor, and needs to go to the extra effort of trying to protect herself from the advisor's sales pitches, that becomes increasingly inefficient as well, which is kind of a nice sort of anecdote, I think, to move to the next question, the very practical one about Vanguard. So Vanguard is the second biggest asset manager in the world, managing about $6 trillion worth of assets, and growing incredibly fast. A couple of years ago, attracted more than half the whole industry's assets in 1 year. And also an incredibly trusted brand in an industry that has actually been plagued by a trust deficit in recent years. What, dear Laura, has Vanguard done right in terms of generating so much trust among its clients?
Well, Vanguard is a 45-year-old brand. And when I think about trust, I think and brands in the same sentence, one of the characteristics that comes to mind of a strong brand is consistent messaging. And I think everybody who understands branding would agree that that's fundamental. And then when you think about trust and what makes a trusted relationship, I think a big part of that is knowing what to expect out of the other party. So if you then take a little bit of a leap with me to think of brands as a relationship, because this day and age, brands are not just the product or the service or the logo, but it is a company, a product or service trying to get a little bit more embedded into your life through apps, through newsletters, through direct emails, through user groups and blogs. If you come at it from that angle, then a trusted brand then is one that you know what to expect from. And consistent messaging is key to that. And Vanguard, everything we do is premised on our mission, taking a stand for investors, treating them fairly, and giving them the best chance for investment success. And the fact that that is the foundation for everything we do and everything we say, I think has earned us credibility for consistency. And then that then means our clients, our investors know what to expect from us. And that hopefully is what's breeding this trust.
Very, very good. Now, just getting it back into the current context of April 2020, and also the months preceding the corona crisis, it seems people are talking a lot more about trust. Why does it seem to be a lot more relevant today than it may have been 10 years ago, Antoinette?
Well, first of all, at present, we are all forced to trust, because if people are working at home, then we cannot oversee them very closely anymore. So we need to trust them. I think we also have seen a number of scandals which probably sensitize people towards trust, particularly trust in brands or trust in companies. And I think the financial industry is a good example. So these are all big reasons why we now are probably taking this concept more seriously than we used to.
Very, very good.
I'd add to that, if I may. I think the trust, like you said, how is it different than it was 10 years ago? I think the fact that there's so many choices and that companies that offer products and services are in a position where we can understand our customers, our clients better than we could 10 years ago. And each demographic, each segment might have a different definition or relationship with the brand, and therefore trust is slightly different. So take 20 years ago, relationship trust was so much more embedded in the face-to-face experience you might have with your advisor in our case. That's evolved. We've gone from analog to digital. And it's interesting that millennials show a lot more trust in technology, for example, than people that are older than them do. So the definition of trust is changing also based on the delivery and the experience. What's interesting then to break down is whether or not you have you're erring high on the relationship trust side is whether or not you're willing to sacrifice some of the trust in the relationship for transactional trust. Mm-hmm. You know what? I've never loved the bank. Their customer service is crap, but I'm willing to give them a big chunk of my money in terms of a savings account or a checking account. There's a level of trust that the consumer, the client, is willing to accept. And it's understanding those different segments and preferences is part of the dialogue these days, because it's not one size fits all, because we have the ability to understand better.
Although, if I just can jump into that, because I find that rather interesting. In the last financial crisis, I think it was the relationship trust that saved the banks, at least. I mean, because otherwise people would have taken all their money off and run to smaller institutions. But it was this personal relationship to their banking advisor. And what I can see, at least in the Swiss finance industry right now happening, is that these personal banking advisors, certainly for income such as I have, they're not doing any personalized services any longer. So essentially, I would be trusting an algorithm now and not so much the scripted relationship I have with a banking advisor. And here I was also kind of asking myself whether companies like yours might have a new also even a better opportunity if you're able to go into that breach which is opening at present.
Exactly what we're grappling with. And, I can't say we're succeeding any more so than others are trying to, because this is uncharted territory for a lot of us, but is trying to strike that balance between that transactional trust and relationship trust that does have to hinge to a degree on technology. And it's finding the enablement tools, if you will, that are technology enabled. And for that, it's the written word versus video, for example. It's push versus pull. Because while this crisis has taught us anything, just like the 2008 financial crisis, the relationships were what saved the day. Because we're all sequestered in this stage, it's actually the technology that's saving the day. You know, it might be telephone, but mostly we're having to rely on things far more digitally. So it's trying to find that balance that enables people that don't have that innate trust in the technology to get comfortable with it. And then also making the human piece available to those who really don't want the technology to supplant what they've enjoyed and believe to be a true benefit.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I think also in the UK, to get back to Antoinette's point of having a sort of a digital relationship with one's financial provider, Vanguard has actually gone direct to consumer. Whereas typically a client of Vanguard's would be an institutional client, an institution rather than a retail client. In the UK, Vanguard has actually made available the service to individuals. And I'd like to ask you, Laura, in this context, what role does the organizational structure play in strengthening the level of trust that people are willing to devote to Vanguard?
You know, a crisis, everybody experiences the crisis in a very different personal way. And, you know, we see this amongst crew. That's what we call the Vanguard employees, that even within my team, some people are wrapping their arms around this opportunity to work from home. Other people feel very disjointed. So one of the things that we are trying not to forget is how our customers, how our investors are feeling, and trying to acknowledge that. So at the personal investor level, they might be very scared because they're getting closer to retirement and they're seeing their account shrinking. They might be a professional investor who is investing on the behalf of another group of clients, and they have both a board to report to and clients to report to. So there's a lot of motivations between uncertainty, fear, passive understanding, complacency. And we don't want to take for granted that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So for us, it's about consistent messaging. It's about swift messaging, but tailored to the different types of experiences you might be having, from a professional investor to a personal investor's attitude. Also, the ability to say, this is what we know today. These are the investment principles that we stand by today when things are bad and when things are in good shape. But also, we're not afraid to say this is what we don't know, and that we're going to come back to you when we know more, and set those milestones for re-engaging iteratively. And then I think fundamentally, because we have a history and we've lived through some of these, what we're able to do, and we have the benefit of a 45-year history, is say, here's what happened during a similar instance in the past, a global perspective, a historic perspective. Here's what's different. Using our macroeconomics, here's a scenario. So based on your understanding of what we're trying to play out to you, based on what your goals and objectives are, based on your appetite for risk, here's information that helps you understand and helps you decide. So we're really trying to walk side by side with the clients, be they professional, personal, sophisticated, novice, and provide information that helps them decide whatever their circumstances.
Very, very interesting. It also gets back, I like this idea that one also transparently communicates with the clients if one doesn't know something. That kind of gets back to your point, Antoinette, about in the beginning, and it's an interesting topic to end the conversation on, is this idea of vulnerability. Yeah. Maybe I can take it one step forward to both of you. What can financial institutions do to bolster trust in their companies?
Well, I'm picking up also a little bit on what Laura was saying, because there are two sides to trust. The first thing is, do I make myself as a client, as an employee, vulnerable towards an institution? And there I will look for certain cues. I'm just going to elaborate in a second. But the other thing is, of course, is the organization making herself also vulnerable towards the society? And I just heard that with Laura. So it seems that as an institution too, if you are a learning organization, if you also ask questions, if you're open enough to say, we have to change things as well, we have to listen to people, that's a very nice way to really show that you're trusting the world, your clients, your employees too. So I just want to hold that, because that's not the most paved road we're looking at in trust research. If I go to the more classic things, what can you do to bolster trust from the other side, so that they will really think I can make myself vulnerable here? Is there are three things which are important. You have to show that you're competent. And I think at present, more than ever, that means that you as a company on all levels invested in reliability and in resilience. So I heard that before as well, that you want to be reliable, adhering to some principles. It also means, of course, that you have to have some sound finances. Like you probably have more with your organization and structure, because you're not a publicly traded company. You had to kind of, be very slim in keeping some of the resources. So you have to have buffers. So competence is important. Integrity. That was something that Laura was mentioning a lot, showing that you act on value-driven principles. But here again, walk the talk. So if you are a cooperative, this is much more credible than if you are a publicly traded company. And the third thing is showing that you care for. So really be involved in the community and show that you want to give something back. So these are the main things that you could do as a company to really bolster trust at present.
Very good. Laura, do you have anything to add?
I would and I like that you're the analogy about the values. Having values, they need to serve you in good times and in bad. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things about Vanguard. We are very lucky that we're mutual. We stand for a set of values around how we care for investors' assets with us. And because we're principled, we have to have that courage to stand by that during the bad times. And that's actually what serves us well during the bad times, because we are core and we stand by investment principles. We have had the courage in the past, when good times were upon us, to say no and not be able to not feel pressure to chase the money or the shiny ball, as we say. In other words, not just to launch products that were part of a fad at that point in time, because during times like this of crisis, it's core, it's real strong investment asset allocation principles that save the day. The individual investor's ultimate savings, their retirement, their life goals are what's at stake. So as long as you're courageous enough to stand by those principles, I think that's what ultimately builds the trust that helps you come out on the other end of a crisis like this, feeling a little bit better than when you went into it. And that's what we're hoping for our investors.